Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another Falconry video. Today's video I want to talk a little bit about raptor psychology and kind of how we approach how we train our birds, how we interact with them, how we house them, feed them, all that kind of thing from a psychological point of view, which we don't normally do. I have kind of an odd background both in how I live and also with work. I work with a wide range of animals and have all my life, from working in pet stores and zoos to being a wildlife educator to helping with wildlife rehab and falconry itself. And I've observed, well, I'll get to that in a second. So I'm just saying, I'm thinking about the mind of an octopus versus a dog versus a lemur versus a parrot versus a raven versus a falcon versus a hornbill. Very different. I also have always been fascinated by the inner workings of the human mind, and I have, for my whole life, worked with and volunteered with groups that help people with disabilities. And then I myself have ADHD and sometimes see how my brain doesn't quite line up with that of most people. And my son also has some very extreme disabilities and is nonverbal. So my interactions with my own son require a lot of thinking about, okay, what is he thinking if he doesn't have a verbal way to express what's going on in his head, and to try to read in different ways. Now, let's get back to falconry though. Falconry has such a long, rich history in most parts of the world that we have fine-tuned a lot of techniques that work. Training techniques, equipment, feeding, all these different things, perches, hoods, jesses, you name it. Things that work well for people and for birds. And I'm sure in that process there was a lot of fine-tuning. I'm sure there was a lot of trial and error. But what we have today is what I would consider to be a fairly effective set of skills and a set of techniques that work. That's a good thing, but the bad thing is it kind of makes us lazy and makes some of our approach kind of antiquated. I stand by just about every falconry practice that is used today because they work, but it's easy if you are getting into falconry, reading books, talking to falconers, watching videos like this, to just say, oh, I want this. All I got to do is this. I want a bird to fly free and come back. I do this, I get the result. I want this species to be able to hunt this species. I do this and this and this, and I'm going to get that. That's kind of how we end up thinking. And that works, but we're better than that. Let's not get rid of that, but let's build upon that. And in our generation, in this digital age where falconers are connected all over the world, let's think further. Let's take this a step further and understand the intelligence of an animal can go so much further, and be respectful of what level of consciousness they have. And it's very different, I have to say. There's things that you watch for. You could just be like, oh, I have an aquarium with an octopus. Great. Is that octopus happy? Is it healthy? Is it whole? Well, what do you mean? How do you know if an octopus is happy? Well, octopus can camouflage themselves, but they want cover. They like restricted places. They like places where they can retreat and hide and feel like squished almost. I mean, they're not squished because of the way they move. If you are housing an octopus, that is something to consider, to understand the biology and the way the mind of an octopus works. They're very intelligent creatures. We can demonstrate and do experiments and see how intelligent they are. It's good to try to make a habitat in that circumstances to do things. You never know what kind of what kind of needs an animal has. I have a llama that is male and is at that age where he's got a lot of bravado. He hasn't, it's the age where you got to fight other males. And so sometimes I have him away from the rest of his herd and his training, but he still likes the social understanding and the social companionship of having other animals. This is how I interpret it anyways. And there's always ducks and chickens that like to eat whatever scraps of the pellets that he's eating that fall out. And so what he does is he sees them come over and he goes, oh, and he'll twist half of his food dish, dump half of it out for them, and then he's eating and he eats the rest and lets them eat what he pours out for them when they come over him. There's no natural biological reason for him to do that. More's going on up there, and all you can do is guess. You could say, well, he's in his own, corralled area right now, so he maybe enjoys their companionship. Maybe he thinks food. But there's nothing in the wild where a llama would say, I'm going to eat grass and give it to another llama. That's not normal. This is pellet food, which is not natural. And so for him to do that and to try to share with other animals that are radically different, ducks and chickens couldn't be further related to a llama. And so watching an animal, I think, is very key in trying to understand their wants, their needs, trying to understand their thought process. Now, sometimes, like with the octopus, that's an example I said where you have to do a lot of attempt to interpret and try to enter their mindset, their biology, and their needs. We have a bad habit as humans. This is like entry-level empathy, is to project human thinking. I do it too. We all do. We all make this mistake. Project human thinking, human ideas, human morals onto other animals. It's really easy to see that on animals we've selectively bred for traits like us. Like dogs came from wolves. We've selectively bred them, and they have traits that are easier to see. Like there's a whole lot of facial muscles that we can really easily see and be like, oh, they're begging, they're happy, they're sad, they miss us, they want to go out. And it's easier for them to do that. Where a lot of wild canines, like coyotes, have almost no expression to their face. They don't have a lot of musculature movement. That's not how they normally show. It's more with ears and stuff like that. So with our birds, when we're trying to read our birds, sometimes you just have to try to understand the species. For example, accipiters don't like a lot of open cover. They like to usually be hidden in trees and to dash out and catch something and bring it back to the trees because there's bigger raptors that might go after them. There's a whole lot of reasons. There's other raptors that might want to steal their food. And so usually just being out in the open is something they don't like. Where a falcon is a bird of open country, but it likes to be up against something. If you see a red-tailed hawk on a perch, on like a telephone pole, it's usually just sitting on the top. But a lot of times prairie falcons and peregrine falcons will sit on the cross beam and will push over and just be right next to the side of that beam, where if a golden eagle flies overhead, they're in the shadowy side and they can pull in a little bit. Understanding these kind of things is important. Owls, many owls, if you ever see a trained owl, if you have them on their perch out in a yard or something, they would prefer to be on the ground because they feel, I'm out in the open, I have a tall profile. It's more likely that a hawk is going to see me and attack me. That's their mental state, it would appear. And so a lot of them will sit on the ground and just kind of even lay on the grass instead of sitting on their perch right there. Seems counterintuitive if you're just going by, oh, I have a bird, I do this, and I get this. Well, try to put yourself into their headspace and learn about these species not just as a falconry bird, but also learn about their biology. Learn about what they are like in the wild. I just gave perch examples, but anything like, where are you in a room? One thing I always teach people in wildlife education is just about every raptor needs a hypothetical escape route where there's not a lot of motion and stimulation visually and audibly, And so, if you have nobody behind you and you make sure that bird, okay, I've got people mostly over here and then a little bit here, but nobody to the extreme side and nobody behind, there's a hypothetical escape route. There's no movement going behind. Maybe you're up against a wall. Take a couple steps forward. The bird feels less oppressed. It's like, okay, I don't have to. Any stress level they may experience goes down if they're like, okay, I need to look here. I'm scanning. Anything I need to worry about with these people. If they have to look behind them and look, all the way around, their stress level goes up, and their fight or flight instinct says, oh, I should go to someplace higher. I should go someplace more sheltered because this is vulnerable. You're less vulnerable if you only have from here to check. And you make sure, oh, please, people come over here. Don't be on that side of the bird. Don't be behind the bird. You can read your individual bird. You can read based off of the species. But also, a lot of these things are not just something to write in a book. It's more about understanding the wild habits of the bird. Where do they live? What kind of environment? What is the lighting like where they live? What is the prey items they go after? What are the species that try to hunt and target them? What happen? What do they do at night? What do they do right before night? What do they do at dawn? You got some birds like a turkey vulture that's used to, okay, at dawn, I'm going to be on top of a tree with my wings out, just totally open with fellow turkey vultures, sunning myself, absorbing those sun rays. While other birds wait until the shadows aren't so long and it's easier to detect bigger birds, and they're kind of sitting in the shadows until then. Learn about your birds as a wild species. Don't just think that they should know what falconry is. They don't. Doesn't matter, even if they're captive bred. They don't know what falconry is. And even if you do all these training steps that work and are successful, and you're like, hey, I'm having success, great. Well, let's take it a next step. Let's try to understand our birds and try to understand their psychology. Just because they can verbally say, hello, I'm a little stressed, or hey, that tall person standing on this side of me is really unnerving me, or color. There could be a color association. Oh, if you're wearing this color in the field, that might stress them out. If it's easy to know, falconry basically came up as a way to get food. And knowing that, it's like, okay, our ancestors didn't have grocery stores. They didn't have money. And you go back far enough, they didn't even have agriculture and ranching. It was hunting. And so it was just like, wow, I can take this amazing predatory animal, train it to catch my food. I'll share some of the food. Great. Back then, we didn't think about the psychology of the bird. It's like, well, I don't want the bird to attack my face, and I don't want it to fly away, and I want it to catch my dinner. That's about it. But it's like, I'm making this video in 2023. And again, it's a digital age. We have GPS, we have smartphones, we have YouTube. We can connect, we can discuss this. So I really tried to advocate the idea of let's understand our birds better and try to troubleshoot through the lens of what are they experiencing coming into the world of falconry or the world of wildlife education or the world of rehabilitation or any of these things, being in a zoo. What is their experience? Rather than projecting human ideas onto them, let's try to understand what are they like in the wild and understand now they're going to this artificial situation of being with humans. They adapt well to it, but how can we make sure that it is the best experience possible for them? What can we do to try to understand their psychology, their wants, their needs, their fears, even though they can't verbalize it? And they do have body language they can show us, but that's still limiting. Let's be the best falconers we can be the best wildlife educators, the best caretakers at wildlife facilities, the best rehabilitators, and try to understand the psychology of our birds from their perspective so that we can make sure they have the highest caliber of experience in those situations as they can possibly have. And I just wanted to share those thoughts. Again, I didn't want to make a list of do this, but more saying, hey, how about we try to think from this perspective? How about we try to view these amazing birds from the perspective of their wild biology and how it impacts them? So let me know your thoughts on this subject and any other thoughts you have on what kind of videos you would like to see on this channel. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. And as always, happy hawking.